I was only 12, but I was already deep into the world of programming. By then, I'd mastered several programming languages and had become proficient in hacking. It wasn't just a hobby, it was an obsession. I craved knowledge and the thrill of discovering what lay beyond the ordinary, what others couldn't see or understand. One night, after hours of coding and navigating through various forums, I stumbled upon something that piqued my curiosity, a link to the dark web. I'd heard whispers about it, the place where the darkest corners of the internet converged, where the lines between the real world and the digital one blurred. My heart raced with a mix of excitement and dread as I decided to dive in. The moment I entered, I knew I wasn't supposed to be there. It was as if I'd crossed an invisible boundary into a realm where rules didn't apply. The sights I found were filled with horrors I couldn't have imagined, a twisted reflection of our world where the darkest desires and the most terrifying secrets were laid bare. But what intrigued me most were the forums dedicated to the paranormal, to stories of things that defied logic and reason. My screen glowed with the eerie green light of code as I clicked through page after page, each one pulling me deeper into this abyss. The more I explored, the more I realized that this wasn't just a virtual world, it was a gateway to something far more sinister. The dark web wasn't just a network of hidden websites, it was a bridge to the darker side of reality, a place where the virtual and the supernatural intertwined in ways I couldn't yet comprehend. My fascination with the paranormal had always been a part of me. Even before I knew what it really meant, I was drawn to stories of ghosts, spirits, and things that lurked in the shadows. But now, with the dark web at my fingertips, I had access to tales and experiences far beyond the usual ghost stories shared around campfires. These were accounts from the fringes of reality, hidden away from the light, and I was determined to uncover them. As I navigated deeper into the labyrinth of hidden forums and encrypted sites, I found myself gravitating towards a section dedicated entirely to the paranormal. These weren't just stories, they were documented experiences, accompanied by chilling evidence that made it impossible to dismiss them as mere myths. My heart pounded in my chest as I clicked on one of the threads, its title written in cryptic code, almost as if it was trying to keep unwanted eyes away. The first case I stumbled upon seemed innocent enough at first. It was about a supposed urban legend, something about a ghostly figure that haunted an abandoned warehouse in some forgotten town. The post was written by a user with an anonymous handle who claimed to have investigated the site himself. He included grainy photos of the building, taken at night, along with a detailed account of what he found inside. But as I read further, the details became more disturbing. The user described hearing whispers echoing through the empty halls, whispers that seemed to speak directly to him, calling him by name. He mentioned finding symbols etched into the walls, symbols that weren't just graffiti but something older, something darker. Then came the recordings, audio clips he had uploaded to the site. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the play button, but my curiosity got the better of me. The first clip was nothing but static at first, then slowly, a low hum began to emerge, followed by faint voices, like a chorus of whispers, layered on top of one another. My breath caught in my throat as I heard it, a voice, clear as day, speaking in a language I didn't recognize. But it wasn't the language that frightened me, it was the tone, the way it seemed to reach out from the speakers, cold and malicious. I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just a recording, that whatever it was, it knew I was listening. I slammed my laptop shut, my hands trembling. But it was too late. I had crossed a line. That night, as I lay in bed, I could still hear the whispers in my head, a constant reminder that I had ventured too far into the unknown. And yet, a part of me wanted to go back, to uncover more, despite the growing sense of dread that told me I shouldn't. One night, as I continued my descent into the dark web's murkiest corners, I came across something that made my blood run cold. It was a link buried deep within a thread I'd almost skipped over. The title was simple, Real Evidence. But the description below it sent a shiver down my spine. See what the others don't want you to know. True encounters with the unknown. Click if you dare. I hesitated. Something about it felt wrong, like a warning that I should turn back. But my curiosity, the same curiosity that had led me into the dark web in the first place, got the better of me. With a deep breath, I clicked the link. The screen went black for a moment, as if my computer was struggling to process what I had just done. Then, slowly, a video player appeared on the screen. The thumbnail was a grainy image, too dark to make out any details, but there was something about it that felt off. I clicked play. The video started with shaky, handheld footage of what looked like an abandoned house. The person behind the camera was breathing heavily, the sound of their footsteps echoing through the empty, decaying halls. They moved slowly, deliberately, as if they were searching for something. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of light from their flashlight made my heart race. Then, the camera panned to a corner of the room where something caught the light, a mirror. But it wasn't just a reflection that appeared in the glass. There was a shadowy figure standing behind the person filming, just out of reach of the flashlight's beam. The figure didn't move, didn't make a sound, but I could feel its presence, cold and malevolent. The person filming must have felt it too, because the camera jerked violently as they spun around, only to find nothing there. The video cut to black for a second before a new scene appeared. This time, the camera was focused on a series of symbols drawn in what looked like blood on the walls of a small, dark room. The symbols were intricate, twisted, and unfamiliar, yet they seemed to pulse with a sinister energy. As the camera lingered on them, I could hear faint whispering, growing louder and more distinct with each passing second. It wasn't just random noise, the voices were chanting something, something that made my skin crawl. It felt like the room was closing in on me, like I was being pulled into the video itself. Then, the screen flickered, and for the briefest moment, I saw something, no, someone, staring back at me through the screen. A face, pale and distorted, with hollow eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. I jolted back in my chair, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. My heart was pounding, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. The face was gone, replaced by static, but the damage was done. I felt exposed, vulnerable, like I was no longer alone in the room. I quickly closed the video, my hands shaking. But the whispers lingered in my ears, and that face was burned into my mind. I had seen something I was never meant to see, something that wasn't just a video. It was as if I had opened a door to something dark and dangerous, something that was now aware of me. And deep down, I knew there was no going back. After that night, nothing felt the same. The first sign was subtle, just a low hum that I couldn't quite place. It seemed to come from the walls, or maybe from the floor. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me, a lingering echo from the disturbing video. But then, other things started happening, things that I couldn't easily dismiss. I'd leave my room and come back to find objects slightly out of place. A chair would be angled differently, my books shifted on the shelf, my computer mouse moved just a few inches from where I'd left it. At first, I blamed myself, thinking I must have done these things without realizing it. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. One night, as I lay in bed trying to sleep, I saw it for the first time, a shadow, just at the edge of my vision. It flickered in the corner of my room, near my desk where my computer sat. It was there for a split second, then gone, leaving me staring into the darkness with my heart pounding. I told myself it was just a trick of the light, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The next night, I heard the sound, soft, almost like a whisper, but unmistakably there. It came from my computer, even though it was turned off. A faint static, followed by a low murmur, as if someone was speaking just out of earshot. I sat up in bed, my pulse racing, and watched as the screen flickered to life on its own, a faint glow illuminating the room. The desktop was empty, just a black screen staring back at me, but the whispering continued, growing louder, more insistent. I shut my eyes tight, willing it to stop, but when I opened them again, the shadow was back, darker and more defined this time. It was standing at the foot of my bed, just a dark silhouette, but I could feel its presence, cold, malevolent, and unwelcoming. I tried to move, to scream, but I was paralyzed, trapped under its gaze. It didn't need to speak, its intent was clear. It had crossed over, following me from the dark web into the real world, and now it was here. As quickly as it appeared, the shadow vanished, leaving me gasping for breath in the dark. I bolted out of bed, flipping on every light in the room, trying to chase away the darkness that now felt so threatening. But no amount of light could shake the feeling that something was watching me, lurking just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself again. Days passed, and the occurrences became more frequent. Objects would fall off shelves with no explanation, doors would creak open on their own, and the shadow, it grew bolder, appearing more often, lingering longer. I could feel its icy presence behind me as I worked at my computer, its cold breath on the back of my neck as I sat alone in my room. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt it drawing closer, slipping into my dreams, turning them into nightmares. I knew then that I had made a terrible mistake. By venturing into the dark web and clicking on that cursed link, I had opened a door, a portal to something far beyond my understanding. And now, whatever I had unleashed was here, haunting me, slowly eroding the barrier between our worlds. The entity wasn't just a part of the digital world anymore. It was real, and it wasn't going to leave until it had consumed me completely. In the days that followed, I grew more desperate. The occurrences were no longer confined to the night. They began to bleed into my days, haunting every moment. No matter how hard I tried to dismiss them, the shadow's presence loomed over me, a constant reminder of the mistake I had made. I knew I had to do something. So, in a panic, I went to my computer and frantically deleted every trace of the dark web from my system. I wiped the hard drive, erased the history, and removed all the programs I had used to access those hidden corners of the internet. I was thorough, methodical even, hoping that by eliminating the digital doorway, I could close the one that had opened into my life. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't be that easy. The first night after the purge was quiet. Too quiet. I lay in bed, listening to the oppressive silence, every creak and groan of the house amplified by my fear. I didn't dare close my eyes, afraid of what might happen if I did. Hours passed, and just when I thought I might finally be free of it, I heard the whispering again. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible, but it grew louder with each passing second. The cold static filled the room, and my heart sank as I realized it wasn't coming from my computer this time. It was coming from all around me. The walls, the floor, the very air seemed to hum with the presence of something otherworldly. The shadow was back, more defined and menacing than before, and it was no longer content to stay at the edges of my vision. I tried to run, to escape the room, but as I reached the door, it slammed shut in my face with a force that rattled the walls. The shadow moved closer, its form twisting and writhing as it reached out towards me. I could feel the cold tendrils of its presence wrapping around me, squeezing the breath from my lungs, filling my mind with an overwhelming sense of dread. I screamed, not caring if anyone heard me, just needing to release the terror that had been building inside me for days. And then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The shadow withdrew, the room fell silent, and I collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. I don't know how long I lay there, but eventually, I gathered the strength to get up. I left the house that night, not bothering to pack anything, just needing to get away, to put as much distance between me and that place as possible. I went to stay with a friend, making up an excuse about a sudden family emergency. I couldn't tell them the truth, they wouldn't believe me, and even if they did, what could they do to help? In the weeks that followed, the occurrences became less frequent, but they never fully stopped. Even now, as I sit in my new home, far away from that cursed computer, I can still feel it sometimes, the cold touch of the shadow, the faint whispering just beyond my hearing. It's as if the entity is still with me, lingering on the edge of my reality, waiting for the right moment to remind me that it's not gone, just dormant. I've tried to move on, to forget what happened, but how can I? How can I forget the terror that followed me from the dark web into my life, that invaded my home and my mind? I don't know what I encountered that night, what malevolent force I unleashed, but I do know one thing, it's still out there, watching, waiting, and it won't ever truly leave me alone.